Good afternoon, everyone. Vivekananda Global University welcomes you all for another beautiful afternoon with another great maestro. And this time it is none other than Shri Salman Khurshid Ji. It's a pleasure to bring to you all new experts and new leaders to discuss the insights as to a bright future for the country. Thank you everyone for joining us here. आशा करते हैं शाम की चाय के साथ सलमान खुर्शीद जी की बातें would be really positive for all of us. Before sir joins in, I have a small thing to share. आप सबके support की वजह से I have learned a new skill, going live, you know. शुरू में थोड़ी दिक्कत होती थी, but now yes, I started learning how to talk to you all. And I'm sure इस लॉकडाउन ने आप सबके सामने भी बहुत सारे नए challenges रखे होंगे. May it was getting close into a room, or may it was staying away from your friends. And these situations must have got you to learn a lot of new things. At VGU, we have always tried to get a lot of new things to our faculties, to our students, to everyone who's connected to us. Was it research? Was it innovation? Was it online classes? Was it projects? Was it doing online exams? All of us have enjoyed this journey and learned a lot of new things in the process. So the question for today before Salman Khurshid Ji joins us is, what did you learn? Let us hear in the comment box, my friends. Kisne kya sikha? Pehla sawal for the day. Good afternoon, Palak Gupta. Hello, Shalini ma'am. Kisne kya sikha? With a good evening, we are waiting for Kisne kya sikha today, please. Learned meaning of life. Yes, sir, we all have learned meaning of life. Now life means something different to us. We can live with everything else. Sagar Mittal ji, a very, very warm good evening. Kya sikha, sir? Anupama Goyal ji, a lot of thank you. Good evening, everyone. Aditya Bhatt ji, most welcome with us. You are here with us from Bihar. Life बहुत important है. Agreed. Yes, life बहुत important है. और life के बहुत सारे नए मायने हैं. Rajesh Tripathi ji, a very warm good evening. I can see you all on the screens, and we are waiting for a lot of new learnings that you have learned with this lockdown. Definitely, Vivekananda Global University says no lockdown in education. सीखने पे कोई पाबंदी नहीं है, कोई हमें रोक नहीं सकता, और हम सब सीखते रह सकते हैं. Education means not just academics, not just the books, not just the syllabus. Saurav Kumar ji has learned the science of good living. Thank you. Kritika from Punjab University. Thank you, Kritika, for joining with us. Praveen sir has spent quality time with his family. Yes, sir, long time, and we rarely get to do that. Importance of time. Thank you, Nikki, for telling us that. Prafulla Kumar Udani ji, no need to panic. Yes, the world is there for human beings. This humanity will exist. We have all become more self-aware about our health and hygiene. Very true, Aditya ji. And that is important for all of us to fight COVID-19. Yes, ma'am, life is important, and the way we live life, the way we take life is equally important. Learn nothing is more important than the family, Varnika. Very true. Kavita Rathore ji, a warm good evening. Thank you for joining with us. Logically legal. Wow. Importance of law as well. Yes, dear, we definitely learned importance of law with Vivekananda Global University's VGU School of Law, where we had some mesmerizing sessions by great lawyers. And today again, we bring to you another great lawyer from the country. Ranjana Malik ji, good evening. A very warm good evening, ma'am. Thanks for joining us. Neha Gandhi ji from IP University. Thank you, Neha. I hope you're feeling safe and good at your place. Tamil Nadu Ambedkar Law University, we have with us Latika Dhuria ji says work-life balance. Very true, ma'am. I'm sure all of us have gone through newer challenges of work from home and meeting our targets. Along with the COVID attacks, Naseem Khan learned to cook. Wow. I'm sure you will be enjoying this, and this is a bane for a lot of people around you. Lockdown learnings. Realization is the most important force in the pursuits of life. Rajendra ji says everything is possible with positive thought and positive attitude. Very true, sir. Thank you for saying that. I'm sure this was a great, great message to us as youth also. Thank you, Priya Ranjan Singh ji, who says that he's from law, a school from law and governance. Sharad ji, thanks for joining us from University of Allahabad. Wow, what a national integrity we have here today with us. Ruchi Sharma, ma'am, learned how to face new challenges and get out of it. Yes, ma'am. Nothing can stop you, nothing can stop us. Jassi Sohel ji, I've learned online teaching methods. Yes, it was really required, and I'm sure your students are much happier now. Seeing you on the screens every day is another bliss. Antara ma'am, you are from IFIM Law School, Bangalore. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us. We are really privileged to host you here and bring to you a great leader, Mr. Salman Khurshid Ji, to address all your issues. And he's chosen a definitely an important topic. It says the mind of a judge. All of us are fearful of this name, judge, isn't it? So how to read the mind of a judge? And that too coming from such a maestro himself would definitely be a great, great learning for all of you, which is brought to you by Vivekananda Global University, VGU, Jaipur. Thank you, everyone. I'm still waiting for your new learnings till the time Salman Khurshid Ji is here with us. Very soon, Vivekananda Global University plans to come to you with another great event, which we are calling Talent Hunt. Talent Hunt online. Let's hunt the talent, let's get the talent, because the power of youth, the power of universities is not just your academic degree, but making you a professional, making you an adult who can handle society properly, making you a person who can live life to the best. University learning brings to you a lot of things, not just a syllabus to be completed, not just a mark sheet to be earned, but to learn to become a responsible citizen. And that is what we call holistic education. Holistic education means sports, means cultural activities, means being a good orator, maybe being a good cook, and maybe being a good critic writer. It could have many more attributes which are attached to you only, which come with you as a person. So do join us for the Talent Hunt show. With that, once again, another great question to follow. आज बारिश होगी? Jaipur has been seeing, I don't know what Mausam to say. It is summers or it is monsoons. But every day the Mausam changes, and every day Vivekananda Global University thinks of getting something new to you. With that, I just got a message from my team that Salman Khurshid sir has joined with us. A great maestro, one who started his young learning from the great schools, the great institutes of learning, which contributed to his life, and his life has immensely contributed to those institutes, calling himself a proud alumni of St. Stephen's, of Delhi Public School. I am sure your alumnus is really, really proud of you, sir. Bringing you ahead into a responsible citizen was your law education, which has brought you into the democracy of the country also. Being a cabinet minister for law and law affairs in the country, he has contributed immensely into the democratic learning of our country and the policy formation at a national level. We are privileged to have you with us, Mr. Salman Khurshid Ji. Thanks a lot, sir, for joining us. And on behalf of Vivekananda Global University, I welcome you once again, sir.
Good afternoon. Absolutely delighted to be with such an array of extremely talented people, as I can see from their responses that they've given to you on what they've learned and how they've learned and what they've experienced during this unusual period that we have all gone through. But let's see if I can add anything useful or valuable to the way they have approached the 3 months that we've been in a lockdown, and the threat of COVID that hangs over us, and which we must overcome. We must overcome and defeat. Now, you've suggested, and it's a subject that is very dear to me, the mind of a judge. As you were doing the introduction, you spoke of holistic education, and I think that's a very critical word in trying to understand what a judge's mind is all about. A judge's mind has to be incredibly holistic. Now, it doesn't matter if every single judge is unable to reach an extremely high standard of holistic thinking, because we're all human beings, and judges are about as human as anybody else. They are trained, they have a commitment, they have vast experience, and all that put together, in a sense, equips them a great deal more than each one of us is equipped to deal with the things that they deal with. And what do they deal with? They essentially deal with difference of opinion, they deal with conflict, they deal with competing claims, they deal with different points of view. Now, not all of us have to deal with such things all the time. Many of us exist in circumstances where things just go in a flow, and there are no full stops, as it were. There are no contrary positions that we have to quickly absorb or quickly account for or quickly overcome or quickly accept, etc., etc. But to some extent, everyone in life does go through these experiences. Let's look at the life of an ordinary person in any part of the world. We know something called generational gap. We know the clash of generations. When at home you say to your parents that you are very, very old-fashioned, you are stuck in time and you're old-fashioned. We are young and we are yearning to do something different. We are yearning to create a path for ourselves, to discover something new, to contribute something new, etc. And that's often seen as a contrast or a conflict between generations. Now, each one of us in our families has different ways of solving them. In some cases, the elder generation gives in to the younger generation. In some cases, the younger generation is trained to finally accept what the elder generation demands of them, and wait for time when they themselves would be in a situation where a even younger generation, meaning the third generation, would take over. So each one of us have, in our own ways, we find the levels for solving these problems in our families, in our homes, in our own surroundings. But a judge is uniquely placed to, in a sense, if you put it like this, of attracting conflicting claims every day. What is the judge's job, frankly? If there is no conflict, if there is no disagreement, if there is no right or wrong, if there are no degrees of right and degrees of wrong, a judge will have no work to do. A judge has work because people disagree, and because people disagree, the judge must decide who's right, who's wrong. And similarly, it's not just a disagreement between two citizens that the judge has to deal with. It's actually disagreement sometimes with the government, with the constituted government of the day, when the constituted government, representing the majority of people who have voted for the government, wants to do something in a manner which would be good for the majority of people, and I assume that is good for everyone. And there are people who think, no, that's the wrong way to do it. That's the wrong way to go. And therefore, they come to court to say, please tell the government or stop the government from doing what we believe is wrong. It's not good. It's not just. It's not fair. So therefore, a judge has if you like, the unenviable position. But judges obviously know that they have chosen to be in this position, and therefore they cannot just walk away and say, look, I can't do this. I can't decide this conflict, particularly if the conflict is between a government elected by the majority and some people who disagree with that government. There may have been people who voted for the same government, but on a particular issue may disagree with the government, because when you vote, you do have a manifesto for each party, and that manifesto explains what a government, if elected, would do on various issues. But attitudes can change, and it's quite possible that the manifesto is not so comprehensive that every single possible proposition that a government supports in future would have been considered in the manifesto, or even if it's there in the manifesto, that people would have actually reflected on that particular proposition and voted for or against, etc. So the judge then has to decide who's right, what is the right thing to do, what is the good thing to do. So that sets the stage, as it were, for a judge. Now, what do we believe a judge should be? We believe that a judge should be dispassionate, a judge should be fair, a judge should be transparent, a judge should not be aligned or assigned or linked with either party that is before the judge. And if the judge happens to have had any form of contact or relationship with one of the parties, it's generally expected, and judges would normally do this, is that they would say, I have a disclosure to make, and I will hear this matter only if both parties are absolutely comfortable. And my disclosure is that my son happens to study in the school that is run by one of the parties, or that the teacher is of my son or my daughter is in fact related to the other party, etc., etc. So these are the things that come before judges, and the judges then have to make a disclosure, and they believe that it's only fair that they should make a disclosure, and thereafter the issue is taken forward. But having crossed that stage, the judge then not only looks at the propositions that are placed in writing, but the judge also then proceeds to hear the parties. And odi alterum partem rule, that person must not be condemned, or no decision should be taken about somebody's rights and interests without giving that person a hearing. This is what our system believes. And it is important that you must be able to say your piece. You must be able to explain to the judge as to what your feelings are, what your proposition is. Now, these days, there is a lot of debate in the country on and within the judicial system and within the law enforcement system, whether it is adequate to have digital appearances, as we are talking here. Similarly, there are virtual appearances in court, there are online appearances in court, and is that perfect? Is that adequate? Is our question that is being asked. I believe that as we get familiar with technology and technology improves, there will be a very, very, very substantial substitute for personal hearings. But a lot of people still believe that there is an element that being face to face with a person who's to decide your future is very important. And there are sentiments and body language issues that can communicate, including besides the words that are used for communications, etc. And you're able to see, when you're face to face, you're able to see the reaction and response of the person to whom you're trying to convey a proposition, and that this is not served well if you have an online hearing. Now, online hearing in the present circumstances may be different from all online hearing in due course, but that's a subject that we are not to discuss today. I just flagged it because there is considerable debate taking place within the legal system about how effective and adequate an online hearing can be. The second interesting debate that's happening in the country these days, and it's quite remarkable, I think we've seen very little of that in the past, and that will bring us directly to my point about the judicial mind, or the mind of a judge, which is that a lot of recently retired Supreme Court judges have been publicly expressing views about what their colleagues who are still sitting in the Supreme Court are doing. And obviously, some degree of caution, some degree of disappointment, some degree of questioning why the Supreme Court is not doing what they obviously believe they would have done if they were sitting on the Supreme Court, etc. How can there be such significant differences between judges who have recently superannuated and judges who actually sat with them on the benches of the Supreme Court but continue now to hear matters because they haven't yet retired? This is a very, very interesting question. Normally, judges are careful about saying anything which is extrajudicial, and that means that they speak only through their judgments. You say whatever you want to say, they consider it, they write a judgment, they pronounce a judgment, and whatever their feelings are or whatever their opinion is comprehensively stated in the judgment itself. And judges, therefore, are said to speak through their judgments. They don't give interviews, they don't speak outside, they have nobody there, unlike some high courts in the world. The Supreme Court of the US, for instance, has a officer, information officer, who would address the press sometimes on certain aspects if the court feels that some communication is necessary with common people. But by and large, courts would leave the people to judge and to comment on, to whatever extent commentary is considered appropriate and permissible by analyzing the judgments, or having scholars and experts analyze the judgments and explain what the judge has actually wanted to say. After retirement, judges sometimes did speak in the past, but on general issues about what instruments they used, how they analyzed, how they arrived at judgments, and they would generally steer away from the merits of cases that they have decided, or merits of cases that are being considered by the courts at present. What has happened in recent times, and there may be many explanations for this, what has happened in recent times is that judges have begun to speak more explicitly and specifically, and I'm talking about judges who are retired, more explicitly and specifically on matters that are still being considered by the Supreme Court or by various high courts. Curiously, during one of the judgments given recently, there was, or an order passed by the Supreme Court recently, one of the sitting judges actually alluded to some of this public criticism, and this was done not in the order itself, but this was done in referring to that order in a meeting of lawyers, where generally judges is invited to come and address lawyers. And an interesting expression was used, the expression being this feeling that some people may have. Yeah, sorry, I think there was a little trouble with the net. Net is not unhappy about what I'm saying, I'm sure. It's just that things can get out of hand. Now, this is something which is unusual. It's happened. Interesting that it's happening these days. But there is another dimension of judges disagreeing. When you read a judgment, it is not always that a judgment is unanimous. That if there are three judges, they all three agree on what the judgment should be, or if there are five judges, all five agree on what the judgment should be, or that one single judge, say in the High Court, sitting in the matter, would necessarily agree with another single judge sitting in a similar case on another day and on another occasion. When that happens, there is a discipline that you are generally supposed to follow the earlier decision, even if you disagree with it. But there's a general proposition that you must keep yourself confined to the earlier decision, and that's called judicial discipline. But sometimes there may be a very serious disagreement, in which case a later judge might say, let this matter go to a bench of at least two judges or three judges, so that they can resolve this difference of opinion between the earlier case and the case that I am deciding. So that does happen. Again, there is another way in which it happens, is when matters go in appeal to a higher court. So a high court decides something, matters go to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court says the High Court was wrong. Now, it doesn't mean that the High Court judges don't know the law. It has to be something else. It has to be something else which we need to probe to find out how this happens, that the Supreme Court will turn around and say that the High Court was wrong, that they interpreted the law in a wrong manner, and therefore must be overruled and must be rejected. And the Supreme Court then decides matter differently. But we've also known that in the Supreme Court, there are judges who, after many, many years, will look at an earlier decision that has been that has held the ground for a long time and say, no, this is not acceptable. This has to go. This is wrong. This has to go. Now, let me take an interesting example. During the emergency, a matter had come to the Supreme Court on the issue of habeas corpus, the right of courts to interfere against the arrest of a person. If a person is to file a writ of habeas corpus, can the courts interfere? And the Supreme Court, the high courts at that time were interfering in matters of habeas corpus, but the Supreme Court, in the case, famous case, or infamous as a lot of people would call it, of ADM Jabalpur, said no. When the emergency is in force, their rights get diluted or get suspended, and the habeas corpus is not available to a constitutional court to apply where a person has been arrested. Now, this held ground for a long, long time. A lot of people disagreed with this, but it held ground for a long, long time. And this judgment was given by a court that included the earlier Justice Chandrachud, Y.V. Chandrachud, who went on to become the Chief Justice of India. He was participant in that judgment. Now, after 30 years, this judgment gets overruled. And it gets overruled in another matter in which Justice Chandrachud's son, who now sits on the Supreme Court, decides that that was wrongly decided and actually overrules it. So now, is that not, in a sense, if you forget the distance in terms of time, but between an outstanding judge of 2-3 generations or 2 generations ago and an outstanding judge of the present generation disagreeing on a proposition which is a proposition that relates to the liberty of an individual. So judges disagree. They disagree on appeal, they disagree among themselves, in smaller benches, they disagree also in terms of reviewing earlier judgments, disagreeing with earlier judgments. How does this happen? And therefore, we need to know the mind of a judge. It's like looking at a car, and if a car is consuming too much fuel, you have to go to the engine, you have to go to the carburetor, you have to go to that part that controls the consumption of fuel. You have to look at the performance of the car. Generally, you have to examine what kind of pressure the pistons are building up, etc. Depending on what kind of engineering structure you have in front of you, you would want to find out why a car is consuming more fuel than the manufacturers had indicated the car would consume. So you have to look at which instrument of the car, which part of the engine is causing the extra consumption. If, on the other hand, you find that a car, while being driven, doesn't stop quickly enough in order to avoid a collision or avoid damage to something that comes onto the road suddenly, you have to then examine what is wrong with the braking system. Is it that the pipes that carry the hydraulic fuel are punctured somewhere? Is it that the sleeve that is put into the brake pads is worn out? Is it that the spring that keeps the brake pads and the brake structure in place, those springs have worn out? And you're trying to find out why exactly does the car not stop when it's required to stop. Same thing would happen about starting a car. If the car doesn't start on a cold start, as it were, then why does it not start? Is the current not traveling quickly enough? Is there some problem with the spark? The spark is worn out. It is not the right capacity, etc. You want to find out. So if judges disagree, do we try to find out why they disagree? What is it in their mind that makes them go one way or the other? That's very interesting. Now, it's puerile and I think unfair to say, well, this judge has done this because he just doesn't understand, or a judge has done this because he, frankly, is not fair, and so on. I think that's completely wrong and puerile. Because the critical thing is that judges who are 100% well trained, 100% honest, 100% transparent, 100% balanced, still disagree. Still disagree. How do we open up the mind and ask ourselves why there is this disagreement? And you know, the disagreement is not just about whether a landlord must continue to keep a tenant in the house because the tenant has a right, or a tenant should vacate the house because the landlord has a right. It's not just about that. It's not only about where is the partition in property so that every member of the family has the right portion of the property. Where is the partition? It's not also about who should be praying in a place like Ayodhya. Is it a place where religion A, people should be allowed to build for themselves a religious place of their liking, or religion B should be allowed to retain or build a place of their liking for their prayers and for their worship? Now, again, it may not just be even that, which a lot of people may consider to be an extremely important proposition. It may actually be about life and death. It may be about whether death sentence is justified or not. Now, there's been a huge debate the world over and in our own country whether death sentence is permissible under Indian law. And of course, the judges have said it is permissible, but they've said it's permissible in what's called rarest of rare circumstances. Now, why? Why not death for death? Why not simply say, if somebody kills, then they must be executed? Why have the judges qualified the death sentence that they have approved by saying it has to be in rarest of rare cases? So it's not just, please look at what drove this man. Was it poverty? Was it bad education? Was it terrible family circumstances? Look at all those and decide, should you really give him death sentence? Although he has killed, he has done something terrible, but are there mitigating factors, because of which mitigating factors we should excuse him from death sentence and give him instead a life sentence? That seems to make sense. But when you say rarest to rare cases, then what are you saying essentially is to say, really prima facie no death sentence. We're not outlawing death sentence, but prima facie no death sentence. What we would say is death sentence in very rare cases, rarest of rare, which is something I think an original English speaker would find somewhat unusual, somewhat remarkable, but extremely rare cases is where death sentence would be granted. Go back again to the mind of the judge. On a certain set of facts, one judge says execution, death sentence. Another judge says no execution, no death sentence. Now, the law is very clear. The law is only in rarest of rare cases. But in deciding whether something is a rarest of rare case, one judge leans in favor of life, one judge leans in favor of death. How does this happen? Now, there are many ways of looking at a judge's mind. There is the American realist school of looking at a judge's mind, and they say, well, you just have to see the training of this person. How did he grow up? What were the moral systems that he was nurtured in? How have certain principles of morality been ingrained in his personality? What kind of school and education did he get, etc., etc. Another person, because of their background, maybe rustic, maybe a background where he has suffered or he has known people to suffer a lot from aggression of other human beings, would perhaps come to a different conclusion. Now, I did once ask a retired Supreme Court judge, an eminent one, who I was having lunch with, and I found that he was a vegetarian, so he only ordered vegetarian meals. And I asked him on that occasion, are you pro death sentence or are you against death sentence? And he said very firmly, no, I believe death sentence must not be outlawed. Death sentence must remain. Now, for me, that was a very difficult proposition to accept and absorb, coming from a person who's a vegetarian, because you're a vegetarian for many, many reasons. But I assume that the distinguished judge was a vegetarian because he believed in sanctity of life, as a lot of people do, that we have no right to take life of an animal just in order to feed ourselves, that our duty is to preserve life. And of course, it can go to an extreme where, as you know, that amongst the Jains, there are priests who will wear a mask not to protect themselves, but really, as we do these days, protecting ourselves from COVID germs or COVID virus, but they use a mask because they don't want to hurt and they don't want to kill even microbes, even something that you can't see with a naked eye, etc. So there are such strong beliefs. So I assumed that a judge who's a vegetarian would generally have a belief that life is sacrosanct and that you cannot take life for your pleasure. Now, you can't take life for your pleasure, but where would you draw the line to say you can take life for revenge, or you can take life for social purpose, or you can take life in retribution? There are many ethical propositions that one could use. But it seems to me very clear that a person who believes in life being sacrosanct is more likely to be against death sentence than a judge who is flesh eater or animal flesh eater, who would worry about the sacredness or sacrosanctness of life when it comes to human beings. So there is the experience and the backdrop and the background that matters a lot. Then there are philosophical principles, and I do want to square this up in 5 minutes. This is a topic on which you could go on for ages, so that we leave some time for questions, and questions bring greater clarity. So I will sum this up very quickly. There's another school of jurisprudence which is called the economic school of jurisprudence. Now, economic school of jurisprudence only looks at the economic consequences of the decision that you take. Now, that's like picking up an economist and placing him as a judge, and he would apply or she would apply economic principles to decide should we lean this way or should we lean the other way, depending on what the consequences would be. There is the what is called the libertarian school. That school has a very distinguished pedigree, where you have to decide between society, the rights and aspirations of society, and the rights and aspiration of the individual. And that school would say that the greatest good of the greatest number is the fundamental principle by which you have to order your society. Now, the greatest good of the greatest number may well walk right over the aspirations of an individual. And therefore, it would become similar to what people often complain about as being majoritarian view imposed on a minority within this society. And that, people say, is wrong, because the Constitution provides certain red lines that you must not cross. Even a majoritarian view, a majority view cannot cross certain red lines. And that's where we come into fundamental rights. That fundamental rights are about securing an individual against a larger number of people in society who prefer to live their life in a particular way, but an individual says, the Constitution gives me a right to live my life in a different way. Where do you find the right balance? And many of the Supreme Court judges and judgments continue to work on this. And there are interesting cases where you would want, the cases on cow slaughter, for instance, have some very interesting arguments about the welfare of society and the rights of an individual employed or individual engaged in the trade of bovines, and society protecting certain rights in certain propositions that pertain to protection of bovines, that was also mentioned in the directive principles of state policy. Then finally, from there we move on to a position which is the liberal position, and that's validated by the work of one of the great thinkers of our times, who are no longer alive, but whose contribution to the liberal theory of rights is absolutely remarkable. And I think it is today desperately needed in our country. And the liberal theory of rights is that if you have a right, then it must be something that can trump the claims of other people. Now, you could balance the right of one individual with the right of another individual. And that's something without which you cannot do. And that's why we lawyers are often told that my right to swing my arm stops where your nose begins. Now that can be understood by anybody. But just as this proposition that's often put to young students is, do you have a right to scream fire inside a cinema hall? You don't have that right, because there is no great need for you to say there's a fire inside a cinema hall. You should not be saying something that is misleading people, and misleading some people to such an extent that there would be a rush for the doors, a stampede possibly, that would hurt people, injure people, and may perhaps even cause the death of some people. If, however, the need for saying fire was supported by some very peculiar circumstances that we can't go into now for the present, then the question will be that the need for saying fire was so urgent that the risk of some people actually suffering because you have to scream fire must be tolerated. These are interesting propositions that have arisen in recent cases, including the 4G judgment case for students in the valley of Jammu and Kashmir, where 4G was suspended on, it seems, people think on grounds of terrorism, but it appeared to us that it was suspended on grounds of the likelihood of civil disturbances caused by the abrogation of Article 370, and that in recent times things may have settled down for 4G to be reintroduced. But the judgment itself saw that as a possible balancing of rights of a student who wants to study online with 4G and people whose security becomes a consideration, because the access to 4G perhaps to terrorists could cause a greater danger to the security of the population of Jammu and Kashmir. But I believe that finally the court settled the matter by saying, let it be examined and let people at a high level of secretaries of government of India decide what the right kind of balance should be. But I think the principle is still something that remains unanswered. But these are things that ultimately are inside the mind of a judge. You don't have the opportunity to set the mind of a judge. All you can do is to hear what a judge says, both on the bench and off the bench, actually analyze the judgments that are given, read about perhaps the autobiography of the judge, to go back as to where and how the judge was trained. Was he trained at, for instance, the Vivekananda University of Jaipur, or was trained at Delhi University or some other university? Is there a particular philosophical tradition and influence of that place? Is there a heritage of earlier people having come to the judiciary from that place, who've laid a pattern and who've given a sense of direction, which direction is then applied and absorbed by generations that come, till a generation comes that makes a break with that pattern, and that you see as a very important break in history. Whether such a break in history should be encouraged or should it be discouraged is completely another aspect to be considered. There are vast areas on which disagreements continue. Morality. And our recent cases that have come in the Supreme Court, they've talked about morality of the Constitution. Now, morality of the Constitution is different, obviously, from morality that we know in everyday life. Morality that we know in everyday life is how people behave in everyday life, what they consider to be a normative behavior, but on which times can change you. And that's how generation gaps happen, when a new generation says, we reject the moral codes and the moral standards that you have applied in your life. We believe those have to now go because life has changed. But is there a core morality that remains intact? Morality of the Constitution that remains intact. But how do you arrive at the morality of the Constitution? 4 male judges, 4 gentlemen sitting on the Supreme Court, decided that women have a right to enter into the Sabrimala temple. The 5th judge was a lady judge, Indu Malhotra. Justice Indu Malhotra said, no, this is about rights of people who believe in a religion. And if the rights of people who believe in a religion includes their right to say women will not come of a particular age, will not enter the sanctum sanctorum, then we must respect them. Now, there were 4 judges who, on morality of the Constitution, decided that women could go. There was 1 judge who decided on constitutional morality that women should not go. How do they disagree? What is so significantly different between those 4 judges who were men and the lady judge who disagreed with them in the decision they took? Is it simply that 4 have an understanding of law and the 5th doesn't? Is it that the 5th has an understanding of law that the 4th don't have? No. The idea is that there is something more than the simple written letter of the law, including the Constitution and the proposition of constitutional morality. And that's what deep inside the mind of the judge. And that's what we were trying to look at today. Can't do it in a single lecture. Can't do it in 45 minutes or 50 minutes, because the mind of a judge is very deep, is very complex, is full of remarkable influences, enormous experience, etc. And we will take a little more time to be able to understand it fully. But at this stage, let's see if we can take some questions and improve upon what I've tried to suggest to you thus far. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I was myself so engrossed about hearing about the human side of law. Actually, I should say that. Till now, we've just been calling people petitioners and plaintiff and respondent. I don't know. But today you taught us that all of us are human beings and we must look at things into a human angle. And that I presume was the biggest takeaway from your lecture, that the judge is a human being who's trying to be the best, be at his best with the best of his knowledge. And so with that, we have a lot of questions pouring in, and I'm sure some of them are real tricky ones, which would put all of us into a deep thought. And some are real quick ones where I would expect a yes or no also from you. So I would begin with the question by a young lawyer, I believe, Mr. Akash Agarwal, who's asked us on the Facebook. So what, according to you, should be the qualities of a young lawyer who wants to enter corporate law sector?
Well, corporate law is a very specialized field. You have to have you obviously have to understand the written law as it's given, but you also have to understand economics. I think it's important to understand economics because the backdrop of corporate law is economics. And now, of course, that is impeding and intruding a lot more into corporate law because of what happens with bankruptcy and what happens with structures by which you have to try and save an existing corporate structure by bringing in new managers and by bringing in new investors. So you have to understand economics. You have to understand banking. You have to understand finance. And at the end of the day, I think if you also keep an element of what I have talked about today of humanism, you should not just become a banker alone or an accountant alone. You have to have some element of humanism because, after all, the corporate sector is made of humans. Although they are humans in suits and tie, different from many other humans in that sense. But they are, at the end of the day, they are humans, and a lot of humans depend upon them, both in terms of people in the marketplace, as indeed people who work in their factories and in their business houses.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for that. Another interesting question that I have with me is from Ms. Manisha Singh, who wants to know that, sir, with your long years of experience, could you give them some tips on preventive measures to be taken in order to overcome delay in justice?
Well, I mean, it's frankly, this is something that's gone on for such a long time. Every Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has come determined. Every High Court Chief Justice comes determined to get rid of delays. But we now know that there are many reasons for delays. I'm hoping that the escalation of technology in our system will get rid of many of the delays. Like, for instance, the e-filing in the Supreme Court recently brought in is something that will take away a major reason for delay. But frankly, let's not forget that the reason for delay is not always a lazy judge. It's quite often a lawyer who's not willing to argue on the day that he should argue. But it's also the whole structure of our profession is such that we take on too much work in order to earn much more than we deserve. We take on too much work. If we had just let work go to other people as well, there would be more people prepared and ready to be able to argue. But there are a huge number of structural issues. There are a huge number of issues of law. I'm told that artificial intelligence will solve some of our problems in the years to come. And I hope that we see artificial intelligence come in quickly.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, sir. The next one is where I would expect a yes or no from your side. The question seems tricky by a young student called Rohit Sharma. He says, do you believe that all judges are fair while announcing a judgment?
Yes, I do. I mean, there are black sheep everywhere, and there are people who've been impeached, and there have been people who've been removed by the judicial system itself. But I think that it's few and far between. By and large, our system is fair. By and large, our system is good. It could be a little more disciplined in terms of making exacting demands on lawyers not taking life easy. And once you get a judge like that, we quickly fall into a position very, very quickly. So the answer is a tough one, but I think largely yes.
That's a big takeaway, sir.
Predominantly yes.
Yes, the trust in the system is the most important thing a professional needs to have. True.
Absolutely.
Sir, another question that comes to us is with your background of external affairs and the legal profession, India opening up to the Indian legal market being open to the international systems with the liberalization policies coming in. How do you think it's going to add on or be make the situation tougher for the Indian legal market? The
No,
liberalization policy.
I think we should look at the opportunity in this. Why do we worry that foreigners will come and take over our system? Why do we worry? We have remarkable talent. We've got remarkable ability. Why don't we think of taking over the world? We have no reason to believe that we are less than anyone else in the world. I think it's inevitable. If we believe in the global village, then it's inevitable that people are going to travel across borders to come. We should welcome them, but take whatever steps we need to take in order to protect ourselves.
Thanks a lot there, sir. Another small tricky question that has come to me and provokes me to question is what, according to you, a judge keeps in his or her mind while pronouncing a judgment? Law or morality? That's where Dhruvika Saraswat.
It
What
cannot
prevails in
be.
judge minds?
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Finish the question. You had
Adi,
something
sir,
to say.
it's just that what is more pronouncing in a judge's mind, the law or morality?
I think there's an interface between law and morality. You cannot apply morality in a legal system uh, directly, but morality does influence a legal system. The manner in which laws are made, the manner in which they are interpreted and applied, morality plays a role. But you can't have morality up front and law taking a back seat. I think that would be wrong. Law must remain up front. Morality can provide a backup.
Very nicely put up, sir. Here, I'm sure the audience got a great insight with that. We have a professor with us, Mr. Praveen Chaudhary, who wants to ask that you yourself have been a law student. And we don't know how much has really changed since the time you were a student till the syllabus and the curriculum and the pedagogies today. But do you think that the norms prescribed by the Bar Council of India for law colleges should be reviewed and revised, especially in this new era of blended learning?
I think so. I mean, I know that there is a great sense that you should not create barriers for people, but whoever wants to become a lawyer and goes to law school must not be given training that is not on par with the best schools. And I think that we have to be a little careful about standards. This is an exacting profession. It's a very important profession for governance and for our collective lives, and therefore we need to be careful about standards. That's very important. And standards includes good teachers. We have to ensure that there is the best teachers are available, and it shouldn't be that the best people go off to practice and the next best come to teaching. I think we must ensure that the best make a choice. If they want to be teachers, they must make a choice and become teachers. And to the extent that they can influence the profession of law, as they do in Australia, as they do in England, as they do in the United States of America, must be permitted to be able to influence the profession of law. They shouldn't be isolated from the everyday profession of law, because that's not good for either the teaching faculty or, for that matter, for the professions.
Yes, sir. Definitely, yes. The humans matter here also, if it is as a teacher, also someone who can actually motivate someone to become a true professional, a true lawyer. But so with that, another question that comes to us is there are a lot of new law institutes mushrooming around in the country. Rather, the number of law institutes or colleges is on an all-time high in the last 5 years. Is there anything that you believe is particularly important for a school to have a school of thought, a particular school of thought every school should carry, or a particular specialization you believe schools should carry to really become the desired center for the ambitious law students? Or,
Well, I think if you can afford specialization, uh, there's no harm or parts of specialization if that's the best thing that's possible. But I believe that I have a I, I have a bias for philosophy of law, and I think that philosophy of law is generally taken as a soft subject. Anyone can learn philosophy, take a couple of books, and you're fine. But I think philosophy of law is very, very intrinsic to good law and making of good lawyers. And I would certainly want to give much more importance to philosophy of law. That is not to reduce the importance of technical subjects, but the overall understanding of the purpose of law, the overall understanding of the manner in which laws are to be applied, developed, and perceived. I think philosophy of law has a very important role.
so listening you was really a compliment. I'm sure the students have been endlessly writing on the comment section that it was really insightful to hear you. One last question which comes to me, and I personally would want to ask you, what part of law practice really allures you or satisfies you the most?
Gosh, it's really difficult. Any person that you can finally get help for. That includes a little child caught in a spat between parents. If you can find a solution for the child, that is not like depriving the child of one parent or another. That's very, very satisfying. But I don't do that much of family law. But the propositions of the Constitution and how the Constitution is to be developed, that's very critical. That's very critical. And frankly, being in the Supreme Court, that's something most rewarding and most enjoyable. And I would imagine that people should aspire for something like that as the actual pinnacle and the crown of what law is all about. If you can reach there and you can contribute there, nothing like it, frankly.
Thank you, sir. And with this, I would request our CEO of Vivekananda Global University, Mr. Omkar Bagaria, to extend a formal thank you note to you, sir, for sparing your valuable time. Mr. Omkar Bagaria with us.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you.
And sir, today's session I think was a very valuable and a motivating session. We, on behalf of all our students, faculty, and management, thank you very much for sparing your valuable time. And I personally, being an engineer, the way you have explained law, I liked a lot. Of course, the legal profession and the technical education are now merging due to the new norms coming, be it artificial intelligence, be it decision-making system or online dispute resolution. So engineers also have to now know legal, and the legal professions also have to learn a lot about the technical part. But personally, I feel your session was a wonderful session with the humanitarian ground which you have talked about. I think our students and the faculty members were motivated enough, and this would help us in taking the VGU School of Law to greater heights. And we will request her if in future, if you could spare time, sometime with our students personally, physically, once the that will be a great thing for all of us. Thank you so much.
Certainly, I look forward to that, and thank you for this experience.
Sweta ma'am, now we can we felicitate sir with an e moment?
Okay, I think it's done. Yeah. Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir, this was a great pleasure for all of us. and this is a token of appreciation from all of us. This is an e-moment which we can do in this time, and surely we'll mail you the physical copy also.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Goodbye and all the best. All the best. Hope to see you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Salman Khurshid sir. What a session, dear friends. What a session to be. The lawyers, I'm sure, must have really enjoyed it to the core, listening to the maestro himself. And we as non-law people also have enjoyed it by hearing the insights to the law fraternity, how a judge actually thinks and how our lawyers get motivated to defend us, to fight for us with the system made by the humans, for the humans, of the humans, and may the law prevail. With that, I thank all of you here once again have a good time with Vivekananda Global University. VGU School of Law wishes all of you a great future and looking forward to meet you once again with another great maestro very soon. I sign off for the day and wish you all a beautiful evening. Thank you, Namrata Sharma ji, for joining with us. Sunaina Kurana ji, thanks a lot. Ashish Narayan, thank you for your compliment of a superb session. It is a privilege to answer all youth. It is a privilege to keep our students motivated at Vivekananda Global University. That's a priority. Yash Sharma, thank you, dear. You say an awesome session. Just share the link, surely. The link would be available on the VGU website and the social media platforms for all of you to follow. Pinky Lata, ma'am, with the beautiful DP, I can see nice session. Thank you, ma'am. Menka Bhasreen Arora ji, thanks a lot for the valuable session. We hope at VGU we keep getting you more of these. Vikas Lambaji, thank you for your presence. Rashmi Desai, thank you, dear. Gurmeet Singh Jaggi ji, thank you. Anadi ma'am has just flashed a link for the feedback form. Mayank Gupta ji, thank you. Law Made Easy by Advocate Drishti. Thank you, Drishti ji, for your superb comments and motivating us. We would definitely be in your service, educating the youth, educating the country, educating the professionals, and just taking education ahead, making it more holistic, making it more fruitful for a better country, for a new India. VGU Jaipur signs off with this. Thank you, goodbye, keep safe, stay home, and keep educated. Thank you, everyone. We'll catch you soon. Kritika, thank you, dear. A nice DP. We can